Welcome to the Macdownunder Podcast for all Australian Apple computer enthusiasts and collectors.
Well, welcome to episode 11 of the Macdownunder Podcast. I'm Justin, and thanks to everyone that's been tuning in and leaving likes and comments for our videos. We especially liked the episode quiz that Griff's Place put up after the last episode about some accessories for the Apple mice, and hopefully we got the answers right to that. Certainly the last video on mice got a huge response. So we've got a special topic today that hopefully we'll get a similar response to as well. So I hope you enjoy it. So we've received some great ideas for future episodes, and they're on our list. So please keep the ideas coming through in the comments below, and let us know what you think and what you'd like us to talk about. So now to formally introduce my co-host, Matthew. Welcome back. How are you? And what have you been up to since the last episode?
G'day, JD. G'day, everybody. It's been a not too busy week down here at Mac Museum in the last week. I've spent some time preparing an LC475 for sale for someone that had already purchased it and asked if I could help them with a couple of bits of software to load up. And I have to say that was like a trip down memory lane, because the LC475 was my childhood computer, and getting some of the shareware games set up on there was like going back 30 years for me. So a lot of fun doing that, and just reminded me why I'm doing everything I'm doing down here at Mac Museum. So that was my highlight for the week just gone. JD, how about for you? What have you been up to?
Oh, that sounds fantastic. And I'm getting into those retro games whenever I come down to the museum. I've got to say, I don't tend to play them at home, but I do when I'm down at the museum. So for me, not a huge amount. I did buy a couple of so-called parts-only laptops, which ended up, the first two I tested actually worked. They were missing some parts like hard drives and whatever, but they were actually working, which is great. And one of the machines I've been after for a little while, so that was good. And I've been working through my iPod collection, most of which is a bit too new for this particular podcast. Yes, I got an iPod Touch 7th edition, which is the last edition they made, in box, still sealed. So can't wait to do an unboxing for that. We might even do it here. That'd be breaking the rules a bit, but we might try that. Just got hold of not a Mac Classic, an iPod Classic, again, 7th generation, the last one. So really glad to get that. So I think I've only got one iPod Class left. It's the iPod Touch 6th edition, as far as I'm aware. I'm not going for all the colors this time, not like I did with the mice. Pretty close to a complete collection for my needs anyway. So that's pretty exciting.
That's great. I reckon as well your little slip there, calling it a Mac Classic, might be a episode idea down the track where we can visit names that Apple has used more than once. So sounds
there's all sorts of ideas coming out of that.
Yes,
that is a great idea. So speaking of good ideas, this week we're joined for our first ever guest. So welcome, Nick. From Apple's Anonymous. Matt and I have known Nick for quite some time, as it turns out, and both of us got reacquainted with Nick through the museum, this year, in my case. So great to have you along, Nick. It was his idea actually to come along and talk about today's subject, which we'll get to. But in the meantime, Nick, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your Apple collecting?
Yes, I started... first Mac started back in the 90s. That shows how old I am, so early 90s. I've been with Apples for a very long time, and worked at a couple of Apple centers. So, actually, they were before they were Apple centers. They were actually called authorized resellers. And then just started buying and selling myself, and opened up a shop, and just was basically repairing and old computers. I started buying in group lots from auctions. And had the shop for about 7.5 years, and I think I met you there, Justin. You were one of my customers. I don't think Matthew actually came along to my shop at any stage, not that I can recall. And once I moved out of the shop, I then started storing a few of the items I thought a little bit rare. I'll say maybe rare in one day. And just along the lines, changed to actually started selling cars and got into cameras at one stage till COVID hit, and then just from then on, during COVID, I thought I'd start up my own channel and start going through all my stuff. And if you see my intro, I do have a lot of stuff in boxes, and unfortunately, there's a lot of it still in boxes. I'm not as well equipped as Matthew is with his Magic Museum, or same with you, Justin, as you've got with your collection, and especially with your mice. I was quite impressed last week. But yes, I do have a number of things and a lot of rare things, which we'll go into today.
I still remember buying my Performer Director's Edition from you. I think I got a couple of that sort of era machine, the 5200 series machines. Still got them, in fact, and probably showed them off to Matthew off camera previously. So thanks, and great to have you along.
Funny enough, I actually thought I had one of the black editions or the Director's Edition, and I said, yeah, I've got two of them in stock. I was telling one of the guys from America, and he goes, yeah, I wouldn't mind one of them. And I went and had a look, and they were the Director's Editions. You've got one of them. I would have had a few of them, so I would have had the beige one and the black one. So I've got two black 5400s, I think. But anyway, I'll have one maybe one day again. I don't know.
Nick, you're not all of your stuff is in boxes either, because you very generously offered up a couple of iMacs to put on display here at Mac Museum. So thank you.
Correct.
For that. So it's nice to be able to have a couple of your things here to display. So,
well, it's either keep it in storage or actually having it out on display. And as you know, you got in contact with me pre-COVID regarding a Mac Museum of some kind, and that's exactly what I want to do. Some time ago, but just didn't get around to it, and I thought I might as well just display some in your museum. So that's why I'm more than happy to do that online. By the way,
that's great. Yes. Thanks, mate.
No problem. Pleasure.
Excellent. Well, maybe on to today's episode. So when Nick and I were chatting about what sort of topics we could put on the podcast, Nick was suggesting that we could talk about Apple cables, and particularly some of the rarer ones. So in honor of today's episode, I have actually jotted down a couple of ideas and a bit of a discussion about some of the cables. So, for a short time during the Apple II era, Apple seemed to use common industry standards, which you'd kind of expect back in the 70s. So the Centronics parallel interface and the RS-232 serial interface, which almost everybody was using for a very long time. But then Apple started doing their own thing. And so from what I can tell, in 1982, when the Apple III was released, Apple released a DA15, so a D-sized connector with 15 pins for RGB video, which different to VGA and different to CGA, which the PC industry used. And fast forward a few years, the Apple IIc had a similar connector for RGB color, but the pins were completely different. And then fast forward a couple more years later, the Apple IIe had an RGB card released for it, but the pins were a little bit different. Fast forward a couple more years, the Apple II GS came out with a 15-pin RGB connector, and it wasn't compatible. And then the Mac came out, the Mac II in particular came out with the RGB card, again with 15 pins, but different pin compatibility. So you can't put any of those screens with any of the other machines. So there's an example from very early on where Apple sort of set a standard, but then applied it in a whole lot of different ways. Then from what I can tell, then the Lisa came out, and they introduced the DB9, so the D-style connector with 9 pins for the mouse, which became a bit of a standard across the industry, but they sort of led there. But they used a 1/4-inch audio-style connector for the keyboard, which was a bit weird and still a little bit weird. Then the Mac 128K came out, or the original Mac came out, and they started using the DB9 connector not only for the mouse, but for the serial interfaces instead of the RS-232. Apparently, that's actually an RS-422. Didn't realize that till I did some research for today's show. But the DB9 connector was a bit weird. And again, if you were trying to buy stuff from a computer shop, if it wasn't Mac related, they wouldn't know or have a cable to connect those sorts of things. And the other update, I guess, with the original Mac was the keyboard connector. So they moved from the audio style connector from the Lisa to an RJ11 telephone cord for the cable for the original Mac, and in fact the Mac 512 as well. Then the Apple IIc came out in 1984, and for serial, they didn't use the RS-232. They didn't use the DB9 that they'd started with the Mac. They introduced this, which is a 5-pin DIN connector for serial to both modem and, in this case, from the picture, the printer, which is RS-232 compatible. But again, if you went to a PC shop or any general computer store, they would have no idea how to connect your printer to your computer. So it was a very Apple-centric sort of thing to do. From what I can tell, if we fast forward to the LaserWriter coming out in 1985, that's when AppleTalk networking came in primarily. And we tend to use the term AppleTalk to talk about any of those sort of Apple proprietary networking. But the cable itself was called the Local Talk cable and was a 3-pin mini DIN connector for connecting the various hubs of the Apple network together. And they were all over the place when buildings were networking, and more importantly, when I was pulling stuff out of buildings when they were being decommissioned, you'd find these 3-pin Local Talk connectors all over the place. But again, only Apple were using those. The following year, 1986, the Mac Plus came out. And so yet another serial connector, this time the 8-pin mini DIN for serial ports, which again, I understand is an RS-432. But again, you needed a cable to connect it back to an image writer printer, or particularly the older printers that still had the earlier RS-232 interface. And even that 8-pin mini DIN connector for serial eventually changed to the GeoPort with the addition of a 9th pin. And I was chatting to Matt off air before we were recording, and I said, actually, I had always assumed it was a 9-pin connector, but it actually wasn't. The serial port was an 8-pin connector, and later on they added a 9th pin in. 1986 was also the year in the Mac Plus that the small computer system interface was introduced. And I'm sure Nick remembers this, and I'm sure Matt's dealt with SCSI, but the dreaded SCSI interface. So none of these were, in fact, nothing that we've spoken about so far have been hot swappable. And the SCSI interface absolutely was not hot swappable. But there was SCSI voodoo as well. You had unique IDs that you had to set on every machine in the chain. You needed to have resistor packs at either end of the cable so that the protocol worked correctly. And if you missed one of those things, the whole system just failed. And if it was connected to your hard drive, your system wouldn't boot. So that wasn't terribly good. Nevertheless, it was an industry standard. It was just an uncommon industry standard that Apple used. Then we move forward to 1989, and we got some wonderful cables that connected to something like this. So we talked about the DB15 connector for RGB color. This was Apple's attempt at high resolution in monochrome. And I think Nick's done a bit of research on this as well. So this is a 13W3 cable because it's got 13 pins. W, I presume, because of the sort of waveform that you can see there in the pattern. And the 3 refers to the high frequency pins, which are the ones that have got the coax around the outside. Nick, did you want to speak a bit more about these ones?
Yeah, those connectors were so difficult to obtain, especially the actual cables, I should say, were so difficult to obtain because they'd get lost once you had the display. So that's why I pointed out to you that these are commonly used with a number of systems, and the Sun Spark systems use those. And so the cables you could readily get from Sun Spark, and so you could get a 13W3. That's it. The 13W3. Yes, the W was the way the pins were connected. So I don't know who made up that. I don't know who made that up. But anyway, we're getting the Sun cables, and we're actually providing them with the portrait displays and the 2-page displays that we had. So that's how I knew that they were used amongst a number of computer systems, including Next. I think that's where it probably came from, I guess.
Yeah, and what I know from a little bit of research I did as well is that each of the proprietors wired them differently. So if you got a cable with each end with the 13W3, you'd be okay because it was just straight through. But if you use something like this, which was the Apple RGB cable to the 13W3, the three high frequency pins, the ones with coax, Apple didn't follow the standard, because you can see in this one, this is actually our 13W1, which was for the portrait display. And if you can see in the bottom right corner there, it's only got one high frequency pin in it. So this one was specifically for the portrait display. But if you read the standard, the common pin for monochrome was actually meant to be in the middle, not on the end. So anyway, if you're really super interested, you can certainly do the research. So that's the 13W1 variant. And then there was a 13W3 that we've been talking about, which you can see there with the three coax pins, which was for the 2-page monochrome display. So they're not interchangeable, although this one would work on any of those screens. But again, because this is wired back to the 15-pin RGB, you could only use the Apple cable to do this particular function because of the way it's wired. So again, an area where Apple used a standard, but it was a rare use of a standard that not many, as you said, Nick, not many other people were using at all.
No,
all right.
I did a quick search on just on the net, and I think you could still buy the cables for a Sun system, and that may work. I'm not too sure. I can't remember now.
So moving on to 1991, Apple started playing with more cables. So the Quadra 700 and the Quadra 900 were released, and Apple had moved towards the use of Ethernet rather than Apple Talk. And they introduced the Apple Attachment Unit Interface, which sounds like a huge mouthful, but the industry standard was actually the Attachment Unit Interface for Ethernet in the very beginning. But of course, Apple being Apple had to have their own version of it, and they liked to make things small. So the connector on the left there on this adapter is the double AUI connector, and obviously this is now connected to a Cat5 Ethernet port, basically, so you could connect it into your Ethernet hub. They had 5 port versions of this as well as a hub, which I think I've got on the website somewhere as well.
Oh no, technically it wasn't Cat5 way back then. It was just called 10 base T was the correct term for it, or RJ45, and 10 base 2 was the old coax. So there were 2 different types of Ethernet connectors that you could get.
The AUI compared with double AUI, just the attachment unit interface was also 15-pin, which was very similar to the 15-pin interface that Apple was using for the video output, I think is correct. So
that's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct. People plugging in the wrong cable in the wrong port. So it was and I think it could have buggered it up. I can't quite remember now.
I'm sure bad things would happen if you tried doing something like that, for sure.
Yeah,
possibly, yes.
All right, so we'll keep moving forward in the journey. So 1986, the Apple IIgs came out with the Apple Desktop Bus. Now, we spoke about this because of mice last week, but it was the Apple IIgs that introduced the Apple Desktop Bus with a mini DIN connector. And just for interest, in 1996, 10 years later, Apple introduced an Applejack version of that, which was for the Apple Pippin, for the game controller. So it was still an ADB, it was still a desktop bus system, but the connector was oval, it was completely different. But that's, I digress. The PowerBook 100 came out in 1991, and it introduced the probably fairly common at the time for Apple users, HDI 30 connector, which is the one on the right there. So I guess I can understand if you've got a PowerBook, particularly the PowerBook 100, which is really small for its time. In fact, it's even small now when you look at it. You wouldn't want this huge Centronics interface on the left there for your SCSI interface. And even the DB25 is pretty big. So I guess I can understand having this high density interface with 30 pins. But it did mean that you had to go out and buy yet another cable. And SCSI cables, because they're shielded were very expensive. And Nick, I think you've got some additional information about this one.
Yeah, the HDI 30, which is that square pin that you plugged into the PowerBook, you could actually buy an adapter. And I don't think it was an Apple adapter, or there could have been actually, I think there was a special Apple SCSI cable you could actually buy, but you couldn't tell the difference between the two. But you could buy a particular adapter you could plug into the back of the PowerBook, flick a little switch, and make it into a dock. So you could actually make your PowerBook a external hard drive by turning it on, plugging in the cable.
Plugging in the cable first, then turning on?
I think plugging in the cable.
Hopefully.
And then plug it into the computer, then turn your computer on. So your PowerBook has to be on, and then it'll see it as an external hard drive. Not quite.
So target disk mode, we know that as now, yeah.
Sort of as a target disk mode, or as you would hot swap a USB 3 or USB 2 hard drive, but you couldn't hot swap it though. So you had to turn on the PowerBook first, make it in the dock mode, and then turn on your Power Mac or the computer you're connecting it to, and then it'll see it as an external hard drive, and you can actually just transfer data or files very easily from A to B rather than copying onto a floppy disk or through the network. So it was very, very handy. And I might show you the adapter one day. I've got a couple of them. So we might do maybe do a future SCSI episode. And there's a lot of
SCSI. The magic of SCSI, provided you haven't got a terminator in the middle of it.
These cables, if you've seen one or used one, are really chunky as well. So when you're starting to put these things in, SCSI itself, I find, is, just a big bulky cable. But if you have a look at the size of that HDI 30 cable that you'd plug into the back, it's quite rigid as well, so, and that cable's quite stiff. So yeah.
Your PowerBook is becoming less and less portable.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, because that particular cable, you're plugging that into the back of an external hard drive, which is probably, about twice the size of the PowerBook anyway. And that's why you got that very large Centronics 50 connector there.
Or, as we'll see later on in the for sale section, it might even be a scanner.
There you go.
All right. Also with the PowerBook 100, they really like these high density interface cables because their external floppy drive for the PowerBook 100 had a HDI 20 right alongside the SCSI port. So they were different. To Matt's point before, you couldn't plug them into the wrong thing, but there were certainly lots of these high density ports in PowerBooks for a very long time. And I've thrown in another one. So if we fast forward it's probably about 7 years. Whilst that external floppy drive was around a fair bit, but they sort of took the cake when they introduced the PowerBook 2400, because they decided they'd change the interface for the PowerBook 2400 external floppy drive to this thing. Now, I had to look it up. It's a Molex type 52629-2611. Rolls off the tongue, but it was apparently used by IBM for their laptops, but they didn't wire them the same way. So you can't use the IBM external floppy drive on a PowerBook 2400, even though IBM actually did design that particular PowerBook for Apple. Nevertheless, single-use interface, not used again in anything, so pretty much unique to this particular portable floppy drive and that particular PowerBook.
Out of all the cables and all the floppy drives, I've never seen one until now. So,
well, they were released only in Japan, so there's probably a good reason.
Oh, is that why? Oh, right. Okay, well that makes sense.
But again, single-use cable. So staying with PowerBooks, the other special adapter they made, maybe to Matt's point earlier about the DB15 being everywhere, is they changed the interface for video out on PowerBooks. Now, what was this from? This was the PowerBook 160. So in 1992, they introduced this particular interface so you could connect your PowerBook to video. I've noticed others, though. There's been DVI, there's been VGA, so they've swapped around a fair bit. in video cables on PowerBooks. But this one is a Mini 15, that cable, that interface right in front of us there, to the DA15D connector at the other end. So PowerBooks have always had something special. Now we go into peak cable mode. Now I know we've got some special ones to talk about later, but we go into peak cable mode in 1993 with the infamous spaghetti cable. So the Audio Vision 14 display came out in 1993 alongside the Centris 660 AV and the Quadra 840 AV, and they came with a HDI 45 interface on their motherboards, I believe, which is that sort of silver connector you can see on the far left. So when you used your Audio Vision 14, you could plug straight into that HDI connector, and it provided video, it provided audio in and out, and it provided ADB through the monitor. But if you didn't have a Centris 660 AV or a Quadra 840 AV, you needed this cable to convert your Audio Vision 14 to be able to plug into your standard Mac, whatever it happened to be at the time. So these were pretty common back in the early 90s, in 1993, when the Audio Vision 14 came out. Bit harder to get these days. And I think Nick and I were talking about video cables tend to rust a fair bit too, for some reason, more so than a lot of other things. So to get one that's actually clean is pretty rare as well. So this particular set of cables is a bit of a hybrid. So they're both for different purposes. One is to connect your 660 AV motherboard to a standard monitor. That's one on the left. And then the one on the right's to connect your Audio Vision 14 to a standard Mac. You can, in fact, plug the two together. I don't know why you'd bother because it's not going to do much for you. But you could if you wanted to. So I think the intention, and we can debate about this in the comments below, but I think the intention with a lot of these special cables was one interface, keep it small and unique, and try to minimize the number of adapters and cables. Now, looking at this, I'm not really sure that this does that, because it's a pretty chunky interface to start with, and you've still got 4 cables hanging out the back of it. So this is why I sort of say it's peak cable, because I don't really see that it's actually achieving much in saving desktop space. But I suspect that was the intent somewhere along the line.
I think if we'd seen more monitors come out with HDI 45 as the interface, and they'd adopted that as a standard, like we will see coming up shortly with another connector, it might have met that purpose. But the fact it was only around for one monitor, the Audio Vision 14 was the only one that had the HDI 45. It just didn't meet the brief.
Yeah, I'm sure the others out there know the history, but I reckon there's a reason why they didn't do this again with a second or a third monitor, and I suspect it's because of all the cable shenanigans and probably complaints that came along with it, with the cost of the cables to make the thing work.
Yeah, I think they were planning on a 15 and a 17-inch version, because the PowerMac 6100, 7100, and 8100 had the Audio Vision connector, also the HDI 45 port. So you had to have that particular cable there on the left, and they would go missing all the time. And so they were hot items. And Belkin actually created a third-party one, and there was another one that came out as well with a little switch on it, so a little dial. You could actually dial it to the size of the monitor that you got as well. So there's a few different variants of that, and that's another cable that's probably hot property at the moment. I haven't actually looked it up recently, but it was at the time I was selling a lot of 6100s.
Very good.
Interesting.
We might keep going in our journey through time. So 1993 we're up to, and one of my favourite things, we talked about this in a previous episode, was the Newton message pad. And the Newton was even smaller than the PowerBook, so it's probably not too surprising that it came with its own small connector. And I've got a photo, hopefully this will show up, of the interconnector. In fact, I've got the interconnector in my hand. It's so small, I've actually got it with me. And I didn't count the number of pins. I'm sure someone can tell us the number of pins that are on there. And on the other side is a GeoPort. So it's the 9-pin mini DIN. But it actually can do a few things. And if you've had a look at the Newton Sales website that we put in the description back in the Newton episode, they've got a breakout box there that goes to video. I think it does video out, audio out, power, as well as serial data. So this interconnector is actually really powerful, but they only ever really released this one dongle to connect it to your GeoPort so you could sync with your Mac. But it had so much more capability. I mean, so did the Newton, but we covered that in previous episodes. 1997 is the next special connector that I've found. And we had this down at the Mac Museum at the last open day. The 20th anniversary Macintosh. Now, this is special for a reason, I guess. And there's this 25-pin with DIN with a locking pin on it. So it's got a locking shroud. And it's called the umbilical, or colloquially known as the umbilical cord, between the 20th anniversary Mac and its power brick, which also doubles as the subwoofer. So it's a pretty unique connector for a pretty unique machine, and it provides power of various kinds back up to the main unit, power sense for the power supply, i.e. whether you turn the power on, off, etc., and audio back to the subwoofer in that Bose surround there. So unique for a reason. They were probably never going to use that again. But I just thought, in terms of an episode about cables, it was probably a good one to talk about. So the iMac in 1999 brought out the USB cable. Well, announced in 98, not released until 99, according to the pages I've been reading. But anyway, an industry standard, but gee, did Apple go early. And they went hard, didn't they? They got rid of everything else and just put USB in.
Yep.
They've done that since with the USB-C, of course. But back in the day, no floppy drive and welcome to USB.
That was heartbreaking.
They were very slow going on to USB 2 though, and USB 3 they were just lagging behind. So I can't understand why they were so quick to get USB in. I think that was just the Steve Jobs. I can do this. Again,
I wonder whether they learnt their lesson with USB just being a touch early, and they probably went the other way with the others, perhaps. Nevertheless, yes. they were on the money. It's a nice small interface. It is hot swappable, so I think this is the first hot swappable interface we've spoken about so far, apart from perhaps audio, which is different again. And then later the same year, the Power Mac G3, the blue and white Power Mac, came out with FireWire. There was also the iMac DV a little bit later.
The blue and white had the first
made it a bit more, correct, which is FireWire 400, and of course later there was FireWire 800. Now again, that's an industry standard, so that's IEEE 1394. So it is an industry standard, and Sony used it for their cameras, and in fact a whole lot of people used it for cameras and other data. But again, Apple were very early adopters. In fact, the first iPods that we'll probably talk about at a future episode were FireWire connectors. They certainly went all in on FireWire back in the day. All right, Matt's already preluded this one. So in 2000, when the Power Mac G4 came out, we got yet another video connector. This one's the Apple Display Connector. And we won't talk too much about it because I think Nick's going to go into a deep dive later on in the episode. But let's just, in passing, 2000 Apple Display Connector. There's an example of it in the right-hand side, which was DVI, USB, and power. But we'll come back, I think, later on, unless there's something else you wanted to mention right now, Nick?
No, there's two different types of ADC to DVI, and there's DVI to ADC, which is what you've got there. So it's the ADC to DVI is what I want to talk about, which is the rarer connector. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right, hold your horses. We'll get there. So yes, 2003 we got the 30-pin iPod connector, which everyone loved. In 2006, MacBook Pro, well, it's probably a bit too new for us, Matt. But anyway, the MacBook Pro brought out MagSafe 1. And, of course, there was MagSafe 2 for power after that. 2011, the MacBook Pro brought out Thunderbolt. And, of course, there's been 5 versions of Thunderbolt since then. And a little known fact I found when I was doing some research, it was originally going to be called Lightpeak. And I don't know whether any other brands used Lightpeak, but anyway. 2012, the iPhone 5. So we're definitely getting outside of the scope of our particular podcast here, talking about RetroMax from pre-Intel.
We've come this far, though.
We've come this far. So the Lightning connector. We couldn't finish without talking about the Lightning connector, even though now it's been displaced as well. But the Lightning connector replaced the 30-pin iPod connector. So it was the iPhone 5 that did that. And then the most recent update that I can find is from 2015, when the USB-C connector came out. And Matt, the MacBook that we've been talking about off camera for a little while, that was introduced in the 12-inch Retina MacBook.
There we go.
Which is much maligned because it was such a rubbish machine, but had the Retina display and a tiny form factor, which makes it very desirable.
Yeah.
But, an iCore processor, which made it weak as water. But it did introduce USB-C, a whole one of them.
Yep.
That's right. Just to charge. That's it.
So there you go. So that's the introduction to the episode. So we're talking about cables, just in case you hadn't picked up on it. And Nick's already started his expertise. But today, with Nick's help, we're going to talk about even rarer versions of these cables. And, I've already talked about the Audio Vision 14 Spaghetti cable. I thought that was peak Apple cable. But there are more, Nick.
There's quite a few, as you probably touched on there, which is basically Apple just want to be different in their connectors being SCSI and the ADC, the square connectors, the HDI 30s, 20s, all those different ones. And then they actually, once they introduce their DOS cards in their machines, well, you have to have a special dongle that goes off the side of it. So I've got 2 to show you today. So basically there's this 3-way, it's called a Y cable, but it's not really a Y cable. No, I'll explain why it's called a Y cable. But I mean, that was connecting the, I'm trying to figure out now which one goes to where. All right, so that connected into the DOS card, and then you connected into the video cable, and then you had video out. So you had video out on both the DOS card and the standard Apple, so the OS 9 or you were running at the time. So they were used, this one was used for a Power Mac 7000 series, so they came out like DOS compatibles, which I think Matthew's got one in his museum there. I think it's his least favorite computer.
Yes.
And basically, also they were, so that was used on that particular one, and they came as a DOS compatible. So 7200 and 7220 is what this particular cable came out. On the 6100, it came with this 4-way cable, still called the Y cable.
Woohoo.
I don't know why, but this 4-way cable now came out with the DOS compatible card on the Power Mac 6100, which actually added a joystick port. Now you can't actually put one cable onto the other DOS card, the other way around. So, and this could be used on a Quadra 610 as well, which could possibly have it. So it was a right-angled DOS card, which was put into a 6100. So people can find the DOS cards, not a problem, but they can't find the cables, and this is the issue at the moment. So there are people who are actually creating little square boards that actually have all these connectors on it, but the cables themselves are actually going for stupid money on it. How expensive they are, they can range from, so a lot of them coming from overseas, and they range anywhere from $200 Australian delivered to Australia up to as high as, I think it was around about $300-400 for the 4-way one. And then if you're talking about the Apple IIe, which I think Matthew's got one, they're ranging anywhere from around about $300-400 up to as high as $800 for one cable, and that is literally a Y cable. All right, so
hold that thought, because I think Matt is going to talk about that one in a minute, but that's just a little prelude of how much these things cost. So we were talking, Nick, at the museum about, as you said before, you can get new adapters that people have made to do the same function versus buying the original cable. But you're saying the real market is for the original cables. Any understanding why that is?
It's one of those collector things. It's always that supply and demand. So people say, look, I want the original cable because that's got that. And it boils down to this little thing here. That little item there, that little Apple symbol, is what people want. Okay, and because it's got that on it, and it could be anything. It could be a pen, and it could be a hairpin. It could be anything. It's got an Apple symbol on it. They want it because it's rare and rare trademark, right? And so suddenly, then people just say, "Oh, I want to get one, and I want to get one, especially for the Apple IIe, which we'll go into later." And once that demand is there and the supply is very low, then people just put stupid money on it. And there's one particular person in America, which I think a lot of people know about. He puts very high pricing on these things because he knows he can get that type of money. So,
well, Nick, if you're like-minded and you really like Apple stuff being on anything, wait till the end of the for sale section. I think you know what we've got in store, but we've got something there like we do most weeks. That's just a product with an Apple logo on it. That, in fact, I might even buy this time this week. But cool. All right. Well, thanks for that. Well, I don't think so. Well, we'll see at the end of the episode. You've got to stay tuned.
Right, okay.
So there's the teaser for everybody. All right. Well, I've got another card to talk about. So another peak Apple thing. So something I just happened to pick up along the way is this Apple Remote Access. Now I'm trying to think what it's actually called. I should have written it down. But it's a multi-serial card. So have a look at that connector, 60-pin connector for this one. And the cable's equally silly. There's the cable for it. So 60-pin connector on the left and 4 RS-232, back to the RS-232s from the very beginning, but 4 RS-232 serial connectors on the right is what comes out of it. And so the idea of this, of course, is if you're setting up a bulletin board back in the day, you'd have 4 modems plugged into each of those serial connectors, and then, dial up your workplace or dial up your bulletin board or whatever it might be. But this cable just blows me away. The fact that they made one.
So that
rather
cable
than just
plugged into that card, is that correct?
Into the card, that's right.
And what's the card plug into?
It's a new bus card. I'll just pop it back up again.
Yeah.
So the one there's 2 types. So this one you can see the new bus connector on the left there. So this was for the pre PowerPC Max. There was also a PCI version of the same card. So I know there's an Apple collector in New South Wales that's got the PCI version, and I've got the older new bus version as well. So 1993, this one came out, as far as I can tell.
Did you just pick this up recently? Or you've had it for a while?
No, I've had this about 30 years sitting in the... Okay, you can even see the rust is starting to show on the poor old beastie.
I believe I've got one of those, and I don't know what it is, but I'll show you next time I come down to the museum. I'll bring it down to the museum. We'll compare notes, all right?
No worries. So, Matt, I think you've got something else to show us.
Yeah, look, excuse me. We had the little intro there before when Nick was talking about the Y cables, and this is, I guess, predates the DOS card or the PC card ones. Was the card? I've actually got the card here for the LC series, which was essentially the Apple IIe card, which was a 2E on the card here, but had a port there at the end. Ooh, that's not going to focus quite. There we go. So, very similar to the PC compatibility Y cables that Nick just showed us, but this one broke out to floppy port and joystick port. But of course, the sort of the history behind the card and being able to put a 2E card into your LC was that for schools, as the Apple IIe was, or Apple II series was being faded out and replaced by the LC, the low cost option for schools, was a great way for the compatibility of previous software. There's the Y cable. Thanks, JD.
And
a great
that's the
way.
cable with, and that's so at the other end is the floppy port for a 5 1/4 inch floppy drive and a Joy port, I believe.
It's great. It served a great purpose for schools to be able to maintain their software library compatibility as they moved to the Macintosh. So, but yes, as Nick mentioned, very sought after. The cards are very sought after, and those Y cables are very sought after as well. Nick, I'll just get you to give me a price check there on the Y cable for the 2E.
Very stupid money, okay, on eBay. Anywhere from $300 to $600. That's just ridiculous.
Crazy.
How many have you got?
I've got one here floating around at the museum, and
That's all.
that's it. And I have to say, I came by it in a box of cables that was given to me, and someone said, "Here you go, you can have this," and it just happened to be in the bottom of this box. So I was very lucky to get it. I had the card already, and I knew I was going to have to hunt the Y cable, so I was very fortunate to get that in a box of junk that someone gave me.
And again, as Nick said before, functionally, you can get modern replacements that are circuit boards with the adapters on them. So you can get it to work. But yes, if you want that cherished Apple logo cable, which I guess is what today's episode's all about, then you pay the premium, don't you?
That's it.
That's correct.
Now, Nick, you were telling us before about DVI, ADC and all sorts of other things. So you talked about some special connectors as well.
This is another one of those cards, and it's reflecting off my light there. But that's basically the ADC port, which is that there, to DVI. So a lot of the Power Macs from gigabit, Power Mac G4 gigabit Ethernet, which was around the mid-2000s, up until about the middle of the Power Mac G5s, had the ADC connector on it, and people just want to run 2 DVI ports off it. So this particular cable came out by Belkin, and again, these are getting ridiculously expensive on eBay, and I've got a brand new one in a packet there, and I've actually got this on eBay for some stupid money just to see if someone will buy it. So I'm testing out the waters here, and if I can get a good return on it, then I might have another one. Anyway,
Might need to go and make some, I reckon.
They don't make them anymore, and they put a GoFundMe something or other up once to try and get the funds to try and make some more of these. But the problem is getting that ADC connector. So that connector is actually proprietary by Apple. So just put that up. So there's the two sides of the equation. So the one that you've just shown us is to go from the computer ADC connector to a DVI screen, which you can buy from anywhere. Doesn't necessarily have to be an Apple one. Whereas the big box that's on the screen at the moment is where you've got your ADC screen, so your cinema display that you want to connect back into a Macintosh that's got a DVI port. That's great.
And isn't it interesting that the cable that Nick had is like thin, small, relatively compact, whereas to go the other direction requires, I suspect, a fair bit of horsepower, because that actually plugs into 240 volts as well. So there's a fair bit of horsepower.
So that supplies power to the ADC, whereas the other one has power coming out. But if you're connecting to a DVI display, then it doesn't require power, and that's the reason why it's just one little cable, whereas this has to supply power to the ADC monitor. So that's the reason why you have to plug it in.
That's it.
Well, hopefully everyone that's watching has enjoyed our discussion today about Apple accessory cables. Who knew there was so much to talk about? Cables. Probably not too surprising when it comes to Apple. Do you have any favorite Apple accessories with unique cables? I'm sure we've missed a few along the line, but, and I'd love to hear about it. So let us know down in the comments. We'd love to hear about your cables, the ones we've missed, and any accessories you might have that we haven't spoken about that need a cable. And again, if you've got any suggestions about future episodes, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. So time for recent news, and a couple of things popped up this week that I thought would be of interest. The first one came from the Australian Computer Museum Society, and they've now put on YouTube for public consumption their Apple III symposium from earlier this year with 2 international guests back from May. I actually attended this seminar, and I've got to say the international guests were brilliant, not only about Apple III, but also talking about the Apple II, Lisa and Apple III production and development. It was just fantastic. So tune in. I haven't watched this particular recording. I've got the earlier versions that were sort of raw and uncut, and I'm sure this will be a fantastic watch, particularly for those international guests. Did you tune in at all, Matt?
I've seen a bit of this recording, yes, and it was very impressive. I learned a lot having listened to it, and some of the anecdotes of the are just great hearing, particularly from what happened in the nest there at Apple as all this was happening. So yeah, really cool. Certainly worth a watch.
And Nick, are you into Apple IIIs at all?
No, it's just something I haven't dabbled into, and I've seen one in the museum, and I know you've got one, and I've probably seen one somewhere else. Actually, at Chris' place of all places. So I've been there. He's got one as well, but no, I'm not into them. I've got enough things to be into at the moment. So,
and as I said, even if you're not into Apple IIIs, the 2 international guests talking about Apple development and culture for the Mac and Lisa and so forth. There's plenty to watch, so definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, okay.
The other thing that came across the desk, now it's not necessarily Apple related, but I reckon we can fix this collectively. So Compute Magazine was actually a Commodore users magazine 35 years ago, and it's been relaunched. And so this is they're up to their second episode. They're up to the second edition. The first one was July. Now August is out, and there's an opportunity to subscribe for the September edition. They've got an online version as well as a digital version. And the reason I'm bringing it up is they no longer say that it's for Commodore computer users. They say it's for retro computer users. So I'm hoping that there will be Apple content in there really soon. I haven't seen any in the index just yet, but I'm hoping if enough of us get out there and talk to them and submit articles, maybe about serial cables or Apple cables, then there may well be some opportunities to get some Apple stuff in there as well. So moving on to coming events, the list is getting a little bit shorter now, but the first event we've got is the Adelaide Retro Computer Group. We mentioned this previously. Next date's Friday, the 12th of September from 5:30 to 10:30 in Unley. Mentioned this last week. The Retro Gaming Bendigo meeting is on the 6th of September, so that's coming up fairly soon in Bendigo. Again, not a lot of Apple stuff in previous meets, but they do say to bring along a console, handheld, or computer. So bring your Apple II along, bring your Mac along, play some games, and show people how Apple are good gaming machines. And the other big event that's coming up very soon is the Mac Museum Open Day on the 6th of September from 10 until 4, Matt.
That's it. So if you're not going to Bendigo, come down to Somerville and come and say good day at Mac Museum. So just to know, I know you've said that you'll be there, Nick. Have we got a chance to get you back in for our visitors?
Yeah, I'll come down. So.
Yeah, superb. That'll be great. So yeah, look forward to catching people down here. And the idea as well at this stage is to have some live repair work taking place as well. So open heart surgery on a couple of machines. So it'll be a great day.
Would you be doing the open heart surgery, or is it for everyone?
I won't be. No. They'll we'll very possibly have Danny doing some repair work. We've shortlisted my 2C, the museum 2C, to have some work done. So that's the plan at this stage.
Okay, time for the for sale section. So before we kick off, this week I did another sweep for retro Apple stuff less than $100. And also looked for things that had special Apple accessory cables or interfaces. So let's see how I went. So first up, we have an Apple iBook G4 1 gigahertz. Comes in just on the $100 limit from Perth in Western Australia. Now, I didn't think about this, Matt, but any special interfaces on an iBook G4 that you're aware of? I'm not. That doesn't mean there aren't any.
Not that I know of. I know that early iBook G3s had a special AV out that we didn't mention a bit earlier on, but I don't think it was on the iBook G4. I think they'd switched to mini VGA, I'm going to say.
Mini VGA on the G3.
Yes.
Mini DVI on the iBook G4s. That's right. And those adapters are another thing. Very hard to get.
And we didn't talk about those. So there's another one we didn't talk about.
There's a lot of video adapters out of the laptops that we did discuss. Anyway, another topic, another time.
Righto, moving on. Next, I found yet another cinema display, and I think we've talked about quite a few of these before. We might have even talked about this one before, I'm not sure, but this one's in South Australia for $100. But of course, it's got the Apple Display connector. And in fact, they've got a fantastic photo of the Apple Display connector, I think. Let's have a quick look. There it is. So if you're interested in something with that connector in it, here's your opportunity, the Apple HD Cinema Display. Do they say what size it is? I didn't even look to see. It looks like a 22-inch to me.
If like the button's on the bottom, it's a 22. If it's on the front, it's 23.
Okay.
Soft touch, that is.
That's it.
Okay, next up, an Apple One scanner in Victoria. Now, the reason I put this one in, apart from the fact that we don't see Apple One scanners for sale terribly often, and it is under $100, but of course, it's a SCSI interface device. So one of those SCSI voodoos, turn everything off, plug it in, make sure it's terminated correctly, give it an ID, then turn them all on and see if it works. According to the listing, the lights come on, the glass is clean, there's no damage to it, hasn't been tested beyond that, but the fact that the scanning light comes on is a good start. So if you want a SCSI thing to play with, here's an opportunity. So this is one of the heavy things you could attach to your PowerBook with that HDI 30 cable if you wanted to.
That's it.
Big boat anchor on your PowerBook. Next thing I thought was worth having a look at is this Image Writer 1, which is working apparently for $50 in New South Wales. Now, the reason I've included this one is it comes with a plethora of cables, and I think there's a picture of them. There you go. So it's got the original square cables that came out with the original Macs. So this would have been in the era of the Mac 128 and 512 because of those square connectors. But then it also comes with a connector from the DB9 back to the Mini DIN 8. And then it's got a connector from the Mini DIN 8 to USB. So you're fully covered, regardless of which era Mac you've got. This one should print. So an Image Writer 1 with all sorts of adapters for $50 sounds like a reasonable thing to me. What do you reckon?
Pretty good just for the adapters, I reckon, as well. So that's a good deal.
And it prints. So, fantastic. Next up, we talked about this earlier. So the HDI 20 external floppy disk drive. Now, we've done a bit of a chat off screen, and we're pretty convinced that it only goes with the PowerBook 100. But Nick and I both think that the mini dock and micro docks also have access to external floppy drives as well. But nevertheless, if you're in the market for an HDI 20 external 1.5 meg floppy drive, here you go, $60, listed in Melbourne.
Good price.
We mentioned this particular cable, well, not this exact one, because the one in the photo was mine, but this is extremely similar. So this is the PowerBook video adapter, the 15-pin mini connector off to a DB15 RGB connector. This one is coming from, I think it's Victoria, for $59. So if you want one of those, rush out and grab it for your PowerBook. Next up from WA, I think, just check my from Perth. This is one of those 13W cables. So this is a 13W1, so only for the Apple portrait display. So it's a bit of a fuzzy image. They've taken this with a quick take camera by the looks of it, and only the one high frequency pin on both ends. So in fact, you could probably use this on your Sun microsystem or other things if you only wanted red, because that's where the red cable is for Sun microsystems. But it's the mono sync for Apple. So if you want one of those, $40. So that's not a bad price, I don't think. Nick, what do you reckon?
Yes, well, you have to have the appropriate card for it, and obviously the portrait display. But if you've got, one of those on each end, and you need the cable obviously to connect them, yes.
Yeah, so yes, you'd need the workstation card, which I happened to look at the other day. I've got one. It's a little bit rusty, so I need to clean it. And obviously you need the display to go with it as well. But if you've got those things, or you just like collecting cables, this one's certainly an oddball. And last up, earlier in the program, we talked about weird things with Apple logos. Well, here you go. I'm even thinking about buying this, so you better rush out there if you want it. So we've got a Macintosh era genuine white cap with Apple logo for $30. They show you the back of it, not that there's terribly much to see on the back of it. But there you go, something weird with an Apple logo, definitely worth the money, I reckon. What do you think, Nick? Is this something you would collect?
Just bought it. No,
you bought it.
It's all yours. So, okay, you can have it.
Well, if you want it, you better hurry, because I probably will buy it as soon as I've got some cash in the bank.
No problem. Okay, you can have it. It's fine. I've got enough things I've got to get rid of, so it's all yours.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us for our cable episode. We appreciate any comments you would like to make down below. Let us know about the cables that you've got, or the accessories that have got particular cables. And if we've missed any, Matt and I have already had a chat off screen. We think there's a couple we know in fact, there's a couple we didn't just include at all, but we know we've missed. See if you can, or Griff might even come up with a quiz about those things in the comments. We'll have to wait and see.
Yes.
Nick, thank you so much for being our first guest. It's been great, and thanks for sharing your knowledge. And for people that may not be aware, he hasn't plugged it, but Apples Anonymous is Nick's YouTube channel. So check him out. He's got lots of how-tos and disassembles and other videos of interest. But thanks so much for joining us and talking about exotic Apple cables and I guess what it's like in the real world when you're trying to buy and sell these things, because a lot of us are just on the buying end and not trying to find them for other purposes. And Matt, any final thoughts about today's episode and cables?
Wow. Yeah, no, it's been great. I've learned a lot. Thank you, Nick, for joining us and adding into there. JD, thank you for your knowledge as well. It's been very informative, and if I'd tried to list them all off, I wouldn't have listed all those myself. So yeah, it's been great to go through them and chat about them. And look, there's some oddballs. I think one thing that stands out is that there's standards, and then there's Apple standards. And did Apple stick to industry standards all the time? It doesn't appear so. So we know that, but that's part of the fun of loving the Apple stuff. So no, really informative journey that we went on, I've found. So yeah, thanks again, guys. That's been great.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed doing some of the background research on this. I mean, a fair bit of it did come out of the brain, but then I had to go back and check facts and found out extra history and so forth. And so if you want to have a look at any of the photos that we've had on the stream today and a little bit of detail, not a huge amount, I have actually put it on the Macdownunder webpage, and I'll put a link to that down in the description as well. So I've documented all of this for future use, and for anyone that's watched the video that wants to go and have another look, please have a look at the Macdownunder website, and you'll see them there. We'll have to find something even more esoteric. So we did mice last week. We did cables this week. I know we've talked about keyboards. I don't think we're quite ready for that yet, but we'll have to find something equally weird to talk about next week. I'm sure we will. But make sure we will be back next week. Make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Thanks again for joining us today. Thank you again, Nick. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you again next week.
See you later. Bye.
Thank you for joining the Macdownunder Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.